Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hard Things Podcast. This is your host, Blaine Burgess, and we are back with another episode. Although I didn't quite post this one on time, it's now Tuesday after a Thursday deadline. Yeah, it got a little busy over the weekend, to say the least. And I think that is a good point that I want to start with. So, first and foremost, I competed in my final USA weightlifting meet. I'm now a Masters athlete. I can compete in the Masters Federation. And yeah, and when I say last, I mean last for now. I don't know. It's kind of indefinite on if I would ever do another USA weightlifting meet. There's a lot of reasons why I made this decision. But yeah, this past weekend I enjoyed the Texas State Championships. I had one of the top 3 best weightlifting meets of my life, just in terms of results and effort and everything like that. And now it's time to kind of turn over a new leaf, start a new chapter, if you will. Also, I was saying all that to filibuster. This is episode 40. I wanted to figure out and make sure for sure that this was episode 40. I thought it was. And honestly, I can't believe I've done 40 episodes. It's really crazy what you can do when you put your mind to something. And this week, so I'm doing another episode on Thursday, just in about 48 hours. And yeah, these two will kind of be like twin episodes a little bit. Hard to explain why that's going to be the case, but you might figure it out through the course of listening. So thanks for being here, and let's get into it. So the I say all that about the weekend and kind of the transition into the next phase. I think it's kind of a poignant message at the time because the new year just happened, and I think I don't remember what the quote or the statistic is, but it's like 85% of New Year's resolutions fail by now. It's I believe the 20th or the 21st today. Yeah, the 21st. And so yeah, a lot of people's New Year's resolutions have failed. And I find the way the human psyche works, when you try to put too much order to something so creative and so, genuinely just beautiful, you're bound to fail if that's the strategy you're using to quantify yourself. That's pretty rigid, and honestly, you're just gonna keep bumping up against that and keep on failing until you finally kind of learn what I think I've come to learn through many painful lessons, and that is, I think the winter time is a time where we're supposed to kind of contract with the season. A lot of people celebrate the holidays. They come back to their core family unit, the one they grew up in. May not be the one they have exactly now, the nuclear family, so to speak, but they go back to the old nuclear family, and after the holidays, emerge, for better or for worse, having revisited the past and coming back out of that with hopefully some perspective that could be helpful. And that's something that, it's not a given for everyone, and a lot of people are missing family. Family has passed away. And I say all that to say, even though a New Year's resolution may have failed, we're still being slingshot out of that state, the winter state where you kind of go into hibernation. And spring is coming. The frost is going to melt, and momentum will be gained. Summer, it's going to be hot. Right now, I was just in Austin, and it is snowing there right now, and Texans are freaking out. And for me, having survived blizzards in Massachusetts and Ohio and pretty much everywhere in between up north. Just not a big deal. But that's kind of the perfect segue. And so why is snow a big deal? When you don't know snow, you don't understand the snow, or the weather, cold weather. I think recently life has just been showing me how my own fear and how other people's fear shows up in the world. How, in general, my observation has been it's unhelpful. Fear is something to be felt, and then we're supposed to act despite the fear, I think. But a lot of people get really stuck in the fear. So today's episode, that's kind of the core message. And I want to start with before my competition, I needed to kill some time. And I decided to watch, a rather long movie. I picked something long and just pulled up Netflix, and first thing that came up was Interstellar. Very random, not something that I was going to seek out, but it just felt right. So I saw it and I clicked on it, and Mr. McConaughey and I went on a little bit of a journey, and I was reminded why I love that movie so much. So towards the end, they're being sucked into a black hole. They've lost all this time, basically lost everything. The only thing they have is each other and the equipment they have. To be alive at that point is genuinely like a miracle. And it's almost only when you get to a situation like that when you can make that ultimate sacrifice. You kind of have to have life just beat you down until your character shines through. And so there's a scene where him and Anne Hathaway are careening, slingshotting around the black hole and getting sucked back into it. And the whole theme is to move forward, you got to leave something behind. I kind of mentioned this in an earlier episode, not too long ago, maybe a couple months ago. Leonidas in the 300, when they went to eventually throw a spear at King Xerxes, he had to put his helmet down, he had to set down his shield, he basically surrendered everything because all of his equipment was heavy and it was holding him back. And then finally a Spartan comes out and throws a spear, and King Leonidas threw the spear and made the king bleed and showed everyone that he's not invincible. And same deal in Interstellar. Basically they had this big rig and these little ships, and one by one they just pushed all the thrusters to get out of the gravity of the black hole, and really without telling Anne Hathaway, McConaughey ejects himself into the black hole to basically push her forward so that she can find a new world and do the scientific stuff they were supposed to be doing out there. But there was really only room for one to move forward. So he sacrificed himself to push humanity forward. And it's like the sacrifice of the individual for the greater good, and something very, very hard to do. But I'm finding myself more and more called to that as I go through personal growth and things like that. So I'm not going to inject myself into a black hole, but I think there's going to be times in my life where I have the opportunity to show up for someone when it doesn't really make sense for me, for my ego, for my body. And so this is something from that movie that I love. It's a poem by Dylan Thomas. This person lived in the early, I think that's 20th century. I always fuck that up. For me, 20th century sounds like it should be 2000 something, but That's not it. That's how I remember it. I just remember that I'm wrong, and I always get it right. But this poem is from Interstellar, and it's what they read the astronauts when they go on this mission into the like a wormhole to another galaxy to try and find a new planet to live on. It goes, "Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at the close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night." I'm actually going to stop there because this is really long. Because really it's just the do not go gentle into that good night that they keep repeating. And the whole point of kind of that main stanza and then the verse I read is I think this poem is about grace. Just like knowing that you yourself are going to be destroyed, and just doing that, just bearing that burden with grace, I think is kind of the point of maturity, and knowing that it really is just like the fact of life. That's just reality, period. So I love that. I loved watching that movie before I competed. And it's funny sometimes, I've noticed at least, actors and actresses tend to pick directors, movies, vibes that are kind of matching up. And in this case, the second thing I want to talk about today actually gets into a little bit of Batman. Not a shocker for people that know me. I love Batman. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But the transition there. So Anne Hathaway was also in Dark Knight Rises. She plays Catwoman, and Bruce Wayne ends up with her in a romantic relationship, we can assume, at the end. But the journey to get there is kind of long and arduous over the three movies, the 3-movie series. So speaking of leaving things behind, growth, fear of doing so, I think the fear of leaving something behind is very pervasive and very potent, which some would say, if like where your fear is, there lies your task. So I think sometimes these movies or different forms of art that I'm attracted to are kind of pointing me towards my fear and my destiny in a way. So yeah, Batman, not to give a whole summary, but basically he loses his parents. He goes on this journey to kind of build himself up and learn about criminality, learn about, why that happened to his parents and why, like, what he can do to help that from not happening to someone else, or how to protect people. And he really assumes this responsibility very, maybe at first not so graciously, and then he kind of comes into grace as he learns that criminals are humans and they're trying to survive just like everyone. The thing that sticks with me, though, is he has a woman, Rachel, who's the daughter of someone that works for his parents back in the day, and they kind of grew up together, and he loves her. And when he comes back as Batman, he's kind of playing the billionaire. He's dating models, whatever, and she's working in the DA's office and kind of just thinks like, hey, this guy comes back and now he's just fooling around. He's with these chicks, whatever. He's got all these means and this money. He could be doing so much more, but she has no idea that he's Batmaning around. So I think what they say is, in the movie, it's not who you are, or it's not necessarily what you do, but it's who you are underneath. And by the end of that movie, one of my favorite scenes, I completely butchered that, by the way, and just glossed over it. But you get the gist. So she just doesn't understand that he's actually Batman. And by the end of the first movie, she says she realizes that his real mask is Bruce Wayne and that Batman is who he is. And she admires him, but also can't be with him because the city needs him more than city needs him more than, you know, she does. Like, she needs him, but also it's more, his work is more important. So that leads into kind of pure chaos in the second movie with the Joker. And then the third one is when Anne Hathaway shows up and she's, you know, burglaring, working with the criminal underworld, and ultimately she ends up seeing Bruce. Like, she leads Bruce to his kind of low-key demise. He gets pretty messed up and he's like down in a hole in a prison, and down there though he kind of finds himself. And the crazy thing, like, I love the element of fear in all the Batman movies. You know, he chooses Batman because he's afraid of bats in the first place. So he ends up using his biggest weakness as a strength. And so when he's down in this prison, in this hole, the people say, you know, if you're going to climb out, there's this rope that people wear. So if you fall, then the rope catches you. And sometimes when you have a rope, you're not going to feel that fear. And there's a guy in the prison that says, like, how can you move faster than possible? How can you, you know, do all these wonderful things? It's fear. It's the fear response, and the body is very powerful. And I think a lot of us walk around every day trying to use that fear response just to complete our daily tasks, just straight up survival mode. And no, if you can save it, if you can live calm and then use that power when you need it, it can kind of be cultivated and saved up and then used to its best ability, and like harnessed rather than just being frightened and agonizing over it. So I think that's really important. So eventually Batman makes the climb out of the hole using his fear of falling, of not getting out, of not saving Gotham. And so towards the end of the movie, this goes back to Interstellar and kind of accepting one's fate as a man, accepting responsibility for ultimately having to grow and transcend our ego to serve the world. There's a point in time where there's a nuclear bomb. Batman drives it out of the city in his like Batwing helicopter thing, and everyone thinks he dies. So they read a passage at his funeral. It's like one of my favorite passages from Charles Dickens, A Tale of Two Cities. But I'll read the whole thing because this one's not as long as the other one. I see a beautiful city and a brilliant people rising from this abyss. I see the lives for which I lay down my life, peaceful, useful, prosperous, and happy. I see that I hold a sanctuary in their hearts and in the hearts of their descendants generations hence. It is a far, far better thing that I do than I have ever done. It is a far, far better rest I go to than I have ever known. And what's funny is, I think a lot of times we assume some kind of painful sacrifice is kind of like death or something to that effect. And it is. It can be a physical death. It can be mental, emotional, like an ego death. I think there's a lot of different definitions. I even usually say this too, like the French call orgasm a tiny death. And I think a lot of people express their sexuality unhealthily in that way too. So there's a lot of different ways to die. And being just straight up being a coward, not facing your fear, is also a death as well. And I'll talk about that in a second. But what I love about the end of that movie is he actually fixed the autopilot on his machine. And so with his brain, he was able to make the sacrifice, leave Gotham. And, Rachel passed away in the second movie. That was like one of his great loves. And it ended up coming back to him in the form of Anne Hathaway's Catwoman. And his butler, Alfred, told him that he used to go to this cafe and wait there and was expecting to see him with some woman, and he restarted his life and gave up Batman. And at the end of the movie, the butler, Alfred, goes to the cafe and he sees Bruce Wayne with Anne Hathaway. And yeah, it's just kind of how it ends. So he sacrificed himself, kind of, like faked his own death again for like the second time in the series. But now he's genuinely freed himself from the burdens, the responsibility that he took for a time. And I think all humans, it's our job to take that burden and responsibility for a time. You don't have to actually die in the name of something. You might. But I think there's ways. And then, too, I mean, Batman technically did die. Because at that point, he was just being himself and living his life and enjoying himself after having shouldered that responsibility for a time. So I really love that Dark Knight series. And if you never watched those movies and saw it the way I did, definitely give it a rewatch and just look at the progression. I think it's just a great symbolism. Even though it's not typical, like you don't have to actually dress up like a bat and beat people up at night to have an impact and to take responsibility in some form or fashion. Doesn't have to be vigilante work. Okay, so I think that was everything on that front. So yeah, we can see how fear of fear should be left behind, in my opinion. Also, fear can be used as a tool, as a positive, to do more, achieve more than you've ever achieved, while also not agonizing over it. To kind of alchemize this feeling for good, I think is really, really valuable. So now, I mentioned there's going to be a second episode later this week, and there's a lot of poetry going on, a lot of literature involved. I got that one poem from Interstellar. I got a poem, or not a poem, it's part of a book from Charles Dickens. And I think we have probably 3 more passages that I'm going to use this week. 1 more in this episode, and then 2 more in a couple days. And I mention all this because, so the next episode is going to be a little bit about Dune, the movie. I love talking about Dune. And then also the James Bond series. The thing about James Bond and Batman that they have in common are they lost their parents. And I think, in a way, even if you're not an orphan, you can relate to orphans, because in one way or another, we lose our parents someday. Sometimes you lose them while they're still living to addiction or disagreements or whatever it may be. Sometimes they live on the other side of the country and you only see them at the holidays. Sometimes, they actually pass away. And move on to, the afterlife, so to speak. So, even though you might not be an orphan, even though you might have had a whole life with your parents, maybe there's a way that you wanted to connect with them that you weren't able to. So I think I've always had this little inkling in the back of my mind. I've always related to Bruce Wayne, related to James Bond, because there's a way I was trying to connect with my family that I couldn't. I just wasn't capable of at the time. And if there's anything that I left behind in 2024, it was definitely, 2024 was a year where I processed that knowledge and understanding. And I will say when the new year shifted, I definitely left it behind. And kind of faced that fear for myself. So that's why the next episode will have some James Bond in it. And So getting back to the Dune part, um, there is a passage that in the movie the witches, they're called the Bene Gesserit. The main character's mom is a powerful one, and when he's being tested by their like the witch leader, um, she's very afraid for her son. And it's kind of the first time in the movie that we see it. The first Dune movie, she says a kind of a prayer, a fear prayer, and it's something that Frank Herbert, the guy who wrote Dune, wrote this in his book, and I think it's one of the most beautiful things anyone's ever written. And I honestly chant it as a mantra when I feel afraid. I find it very, very helpful. So this is called the Litany Against Fear. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. So that's the prayer that the witches tend to use. The work that they do, kind of the emotions that you have to feel to kind of face your fear and still move forward and act, are scary in this inner world that we all live in. Someone the other day just mentioned to me, like, there's a certain percentage of people that don't have an inner monologue, and I don't think it's because anything's wrong with them. I think it's because they turned it off. It's absolutely terrifying to have that internal dialogue and not be afraid. So that mantra, again, is something I say when I feel afraid. It helps me to remind myself that this stuff, just kind of validate your fear. Like, if you look your fear straight in the face and say, like, hey, yeah, we should be scared, but guess what? We still got to do our job. I think that's, again, like one of the hardest things a human being can do. So yeah, the litany against fear, very powerful. I think this next episode in 2 days, I'm going to start by reading that passage. Got a little James Bond going as well. There's 2 times where poetry is used in the newer James Bond, so the Daniel Craig James Bonds, and I love his character for several reasons, and I'm going to talk about that evolution a lot, like the Batman evolution, and I just think it's really interesting about the whole orphan thing. Even though many people do grow up with their parents are human. They don't always show up for you in the way that you wish they would, but they're human beings, and they're, you get what you get. And the sooner that we all accept that, the sooner that we kind of release that, leave that behind, the quicker you can move forward, because that's really the goal. And then, as your life progresses and succeeds, you can share that with your parents if they're still here, and very, very useful, worth it, all the above. So yeah, I think that's going to be it for today. We're going to pick up where we left off here in about 48 hours, and yeah, I think the message I want to leave everyone with is, if you had a New Year's resolution that failed by now, really ever in your life, I mean, I've been alive 34 years and some change, so that's how many New Year's I've had, roughly. And since I've been old enough to make a resolution, I don't think I've had one that's ever gone perfect. But I'm going to end with maybe a little bit of hope. Hope can be useful, but hope without love is way less effective. I think the opposite of fear is love. And there's a quote I saw recently. It basically says, like, love is in the trying. So if you made a New Year's resolution and you tried, you may have fell short, you may have failed, but the love is in the trying. You try to step up to your fear, face it, do something that's useful for you, and yeah, it may not have gone your way, but if you have love, you're trying to express it, and you gave it a shot, do it again, try better, love better. That's the way that you can tackle fear and eventually grow to be the human being you're supposed to be. So I hope that message helps you as we get into 2025. It's kind of crazy. Ohio State won the national championship and Donald Trump was inaugurated yesterday. It's really kind of a massive shift that I felt personally. And so I'm really excited to put this episode out, to record this next one, and just keep on keeping on. Pretty soon I'm going to be at episode 52, which is, if you're keeping up, that's a year's worth of podcasts, which to me, I think that was a resolution I made last year, was just to do creative things like consistently. And so that resolution might be the first one that I ever kept, even though I post some episodes late. They always come around, and I always come back to that self-expression, and I think I'm really proud of myself for that. And I never give myself compliments, so you guys heard it here first. All right, I got to go to school here pretty soon for a lab, but thank you for listening if you made it this far. Once again, give yourself some grace, keep on growing, and we'll see you next time.